Nice transition to Sydney, who's going to tell us a little bit about how climate change is affecting the construction industry, what kind of trends that you're seeing, and I'm guessing you're going to be building a lot of the places in Green City, right?
I hope so. So when I was thinking about this question, in construction, and Mark Hourigan, as you know, famously says, our mission is to build uniquely remarkable relationships and buildings, and relationships is very intentional first because it starts with our clients. And so when we think about how climate change impacts construction, first we talk about our clients who are demanding all the more sustainable buildings, they're demanding resiliency. We have an office in Hampton Roads, and we're currently building a project that is intentionally built in the floodplain to specifically demonstrate the different resilience strategies that exist for those companies that can't just pick up and leave. And so we are faced with trying to adapt to, what are those new technologies, not only figuring them out, but figuring out what they cost and how we install them. Our clients are more so now than ever smarter about the building technologies that exist and take an active role in not only demanding them, but ensuring that they come across and are delivered that way. So our clients really are the reason that we even get to start building projects like that. And then comes the buildings. The actual buildings themselves are becoming, more sustainable. Excuse me, sorry. Even though I save the planet, I don't get to be taken away from pollen and affected by pollen. So just because I do that for a living doesn't mean pollen doesn't affect me. But the buildings themselves are far more efficient than they've ever been. Again, I'm often talking to our trade partners, who were formerly called subcontractors, but are now trade partners. They are oftentimes asking, what are the newest technologies that I need to know about? How does my workforce adapt to those kinds of things? And so we're often talking about those things. Our buildings are physically higher. We're starting to build more buildings where ground floors are meant to flood, especially in Hampton Roads. They know for a fact that water is coming. There is no choice. If they're in place, they have to stay there. They can't just up and migrate. A lot of the companies that work there are supporting the community. And so our building floor elevations are getting higher. So the clients that are able to build new buildings are taking that as a first step. Well, where are we in the floodplain? And let's look at those floodplain maps and figure out what is a 100-year flood going to look like? Because they are coming more often. And because of that, it's not just it's going to happen once in a blue moon. It could happen every week. There are some times in Hampton Roads and it's sunny just like a day like this and the winds are just right that it floods and people can't get to work. It's a very big economic problem. And so our businesses and our clients are thinking about, okay, can we put the entire first floor as just rainwater cisterns and just the parking lot so that it can flood, and when it does flood, I can still work on the second floor or third floor. And the only thing I tell them is, are your employees going to come to work if the first level of the building's flooded? Like, do they have kayaks? Like, how are they getting there? But their whole intention is we've made an investment in a building that's meant to last the next 50 to 100 years. So how do we ensure that our building is more resilient to this climate change? And they're always, the fight is, well, which flood map do you use? And that's where I let the smart people in the room take on that argument. And then finally, it's our on-site operations. Our workers are impacted more and more by the rising heat, especially. That OSHA is releasing new guidelines and standards related to especially heat-related illnesses. And so that means on site that our subcontractors, our trade partners, our superintendents have to be more aware and adapt to that. It's not just the normal off-the-shelf safety manual that's going to work anymore. The other thing is that we have to be ready for an emergency plan for weather. These storms that are coming, we used to say, we just have hurricane season. There's a special, toolbox talk about what we need to do to the site. That's an every week, every month occurrence now that we're talking about. How are you storing materials? How are you securing the building itself before it gets in the hands of our clients? And that, wasn't something that we talked about 5 years ago. It was, oh yeah, we got a hurricane, so bunker down the hatches. It's like, this is every other week. We're talking about rain, we're talking about wind, we're talking about extreme periods of high heat. So those are things that we have to think about in our site logistics planning and our safety manuals. We're educating our subcontractors about that. Another thing that we're really wrestling with right now is material disposal. We know that the EPA is looking at PVC as its next toxic material. And if you can imagine in the construction industry, that's going to be a big problem for our operations. My day job and my cohort, Lane over there, it's our job to enforce these types of things on site, but also empathize with the people doing the actual work every day. And so really understanding, okay, well, if these orders come down, rightfully so, then what do we have to do? How do we change our operations to ensure that we maintain compliance? And then the other thing that is really, really prevalent right now in our minds, it's kind of a full circle moment for me, and studying environmental sciences and really understanding kind of the world and talking about endangered species. There's a couple of bats that have just ended up on the endangered species list who are wreaking a lot of havoc in the development world right now. That's because it is now time for developers to stop actually removing trees. And it's not just here in Virginia, it's 37 states. And 5 years ago, those bats weren't on the endangered species list, and it was, yes, that they were a protected species, but it wasn't so critical that their habitat be protected. And so we did that. And now what could happen is that between the months of April and November in Virginia, you may not be able to put down a tree, a single tree. And when I have to talk to contractors about that, you can understand all of the hullabaloo that comes out of that. And so that's the full circle moment of how climate change has impacted the construction industry. This isn't something that we can control. If that's a mandate that comes down from EPA for an endangered species, we have to do everything we can to protect that species. We don't have a choice. And our business model may have to change. And the VDOT and the federal government have already put in guidelines and standards that say, hey, if you intended already to develop in between the months of April and November and pull down trees, you have to find a way to do it differently. And if there's an added cost, there's an added cost, but we don't have a choice. And so the full vote on that officially is at the end of the month. And so you believe that I am watching very closely to see what happens and how that it really impacts our industry. But that's like top of mind. It's in every conversation we have about when can we start. Everybody's trying to get started right now, and if you know development, that doesn't happen. So, no.
All right, you covered a lot of ground, Sydney. On the pollen thing, I'm pretty sure Jeremy's got some slides that'll tell you that there actually is more pollen in the